Well, hello there, and welcome to this third lecture in the delivery cluster series here. And it is our absolute pleasure and honor and excitement to have you along this delivery cluster journey. And we are really excited that you've made the commitment to really taking your knowledge about delivery to the next level. And this is all part of your TAE 40122 Certificate 4 in Training Assessment course with RAM Training Services. Now, in the previous couple of lectures with the delivery cluster, we've looked at what are some fundamental structural pieces that need to be in play for a great quality training session to take place. We also looked at the difference between training and education, and we looked at overall, how do you start a session? How do you finish a session? How do you come up with great ideas for your session? And how do you put it together based on a traditional unit of competency, so to speak? And we're hoping that you've watched those lectures a couple of times there, and maybe you've taken some notes. Maybe you've even started to apply that into your own context, your own industry, and maybe you've had some thoughts bubbling as you watch those last couple of lectures there. Now, this lecture is going to really look at how do we make our training as engaging as possible so that your learners don't just come along to your sessions and experience, but they love your sessions and they give you really great positive feedback, right? So in this session, we're really going to look at the science of engagement, how you can build it, how you can create it, and how you can make sure that people really are actively involved in your session. So this is going to be an amazing lecture. You're going to get so much out of it. So definitely grab a pen and get ready to write and take lots and lots and lots of notes. All right. So let's jump into the third lecture in the delivery cluster series here. So what will be covered in this webinar? Number one, the 4 stages to learning anything. So if you're going to be a great trainer, you kind of need to know when your learners are learning things and the process that they're actually going to go through in order to learn something. The next one is the 3 pillars to a successful training session. It would be a good idea to know what are those 3 pillars there. Next is unpacking rapport. And how do we build that? Let's have a chat about icebreakers. Let's have a chat about trainer self intros, right? Let's have a chat about unpacking engagement, the science of engagement, and how to build it. We're going to look at advanced questioning techniques and different questioning styles that you can use to really engage your audiences and get them to respond. We're going to look at how do you make your content memorable so that it is pretty much unforgettable and people walk away remembering what you actually taught them. It's probably a good idea. Learning styles and how that will impact your training sessions, personality styles, and how you can work with those personalities that you have in your training room to get optimal outcomes. Then last of all, using video successfully in a training session. And that's not something that we can just assume is automatically going to go well. There's a number of components that come into using video successfully. All right. So let's jump into the 4 stages to learning anything. All right, so get ready, grab a pen, get ready to write. So there's 4 stages to learn anything. Now, in the previous lecture, we talked about the concept of the life jacket, and it's important that unless someone's done something in front of you, you can't really say that they've actually learned it, right? Now, let's actually unpack the 4 stages someone goes through when learning something. All right, so number 1 here is exposure. Exposure. All right, number 2, if you're taking notes, which I'm sure that you are, is practice. So number 1 is exposure. Number 2 is practice. Number 3 is personalization. Personalization. And last of all, number 4 is application. Application back in the real world or application back in the workplace. So number 1 is exposure. Now that could be you attend a seminar, you attend a webinar, you hear about something, maybe you read about something, you are exposed to the idea, okay? Now, number 2 is practice. So maybe you hear the concept and maybe you, I don't know, fill out an exercise in a textbook, or maybe you practice using it in a scenario. Okay. Number 3 is personalization. Now, that is asking yourself some questions such as, how does this concept apply to me? Where will I use this concept? Who else could I share this concept with? And really looking at how does the concept itself really relate to you as an individual? And how do you really personalize the information? And last of all, we've got application. Now, application is the idea of actually using the concept in the real world or testing it and trialing it out. Okay. So, a great example that was shared with me recently or shared with us was the idea of learning a language. All right. So maybe you travel to a foreign country and you are exposed to the language, right? And you are exposed to phrases. Maybe you even got a guidebook, right? Now, number two here is practice. So maybe you look at your guidebook or you look at your grammar book and you start practicing using some of the phrases, but it's in a very controlled environment there, right? And number three is personalization. Now, this is the critical piece here, right? Because we know that until you actually start to practice with purpose, nothing changes, right? So the personalization side of things would be to actually, sit down and to write some sentences about you and your life and about traveling, right? So maybe you create a travel journal, right? And you start to personalize the experience. And then the application side of things will be maybe to read that journal entry to someone else, or maybe to actually practice the phrases with people that you come across and meet. All right. So, what we need to realize is that it is an entire cycle. And until the cycle is enacted, we can't really say that we've learned something. So, the exposure, we hear it, we see it, we practice it in a controlled environment. Personalization is thinking, how does it relate to myself? And then application would be trying it out and doing it, and then reflecting on it, and then trying it again and trying it again. So let's imagine we're in the world of driving a forklift. All right. So maybe exposure, maybe we are exposed to the ideas and the principles of driving a forklift. Maybe we go along to a presentation on driving forklift, and it's the fundamentals of forklift driving. Number two is practice, right? So that would be maybe we practice answering some questions about the forklift, right? Maybe we label the parts, and maybe we even go out and we touch the forklift and practice a couple of things. Now, the personalization side of things could be thinking, okay, what is really challenging for me right now? Or what is getting easier? Or chatting to other people about what you've just learned. And maybe even asking oneself, where will I be driving forklifts? And how will I be applying this knowledge? And really asking ourselves pertinent questions to personalize the whole forklift experience. Then next, we've got the application. So maybe you get into the forklift and you start driving it around and you see how the knowledge is actually applied and you apply that information. All right. So we've gone through the 4 stages here. We've exposed ourselves. We've practiced in constrained situations and environments. Number 3, we've personalized it. And last of all, we've applied it to real world circumstances there. So let's take a moment. Reflect on a time when you might have gone through that learning process yourself. Maybe it was something in your workplace. Maybe you learned a new skill. Maybe it was something like learning a language. Maybe it was like riding a motorbike. Maybe it was like, getting your jet ski license. Maybe it was riding a horse. Maybe it was learning to communicate with people. All right. Guaranteed, if you reflect, you would have gone through that 4-stage process. And the more that you can clearly identify when were the moments that you were at those particular points, learning becomes quite clear for you. And you start to appreciate the journey that your learners go through as well. All right. So I'll give you a moment to think about that. And once you've done that, let's jump into what we call the 3 pillars to a successful training session. 3 pillars to a successful training session. Now, this model is essentially RER. It's the RER model that is essentially a model that has been described, created, and designed, and it's something that RAM Training Services have been teaching on pretty much for about 8-9 years now. And it is the fundamental, I guess, framework that really sets you up to create a great, successful training session. And it's not going to be found in any textbook out there. It's intellectual property there, pretty much, of an idea that was conceptualized many, many years ago when the team here at RAM Training Services stepped back and we thought, what does actually, lead to, or what are the fundamental things that have to be in place, or even signposts that a great training session is about to happen or has happened, right? So let's jump into it. So the first one there, R, stands for rapport. All right. So if you're taking notes, don't forget to write down R stands for rapport. And we'll talk about what that means in just a moment. E stands for engagement. And R stands for retention. So we've got rapport, engagement, retention. Now, the way that we define these is essentially rapport is a sense of connection between everyone in the room, right? So a sense of connection between the trainer and the group, and a sense of connection between the group members themselves. Engagement is the level of response and participation that you have from the group members. Engagement. R stands for retention, and retention is basically how much do people remember from what you actually tell them, and how much are they able to go away back to their workplace and apply it accurately and successfully. All right, so we got rapport, engagement, retention, and we would postulate that if those three things are in your session and are at a very strong level, and there's a high degree of rapport, engagement, retention in your training sessions, highly likely you have delivered, or you will deliver, a great training session. So let's unpack each of these a little bit deeper. So we got rapport. Now, rapport is essentially needed between the group members and the participants, and it's also needed between the group and the trainer, and the trainer and the group. Right? That might sound a little bit obvious and a little bit self-evident, but we need to appreciate that unless we actually put our attention and focus towards these things and do it strategically, we occasionally can be creating problems that we're not even aware that we're creating. All right. So let's first address rapport between the group members. All right. Rapport between the group members. All right. So let's jump into it. How do we typically try to build rapport between the group members? Well, we typically try to do it through icebreakers. Now, icebreakers are absolutely fine, and they're a great strategy. But unfortunately, when they are done poorly, they actually have a negative effect on our audience and our training session. And unfortunately, there is a very common icebreaker that is done that is very, very unsuccessful. And hopefully you haven't seen it too much. Hopefully you haven't been part of it too much. But there is one fundamental icebreaker that we would postulate people are a little bit sick and tired of, right? Now, that icebreaker sounds like this. Everyone, stand up. Go and meet someone, tell them one interesting thing about yourself and why you've come along to this course. Right? Now, at surface level, this can be a great idea and great concept. And we need to appreciate there is a great intention behind it. But unfortunately, it often goes very, very badly. And the reason for that is fundamentally the real purpose of an icebreaker is to create comfort with the members in the group. All right. So number one, the purpose of an icebreaker is to create comfort with other members in the group. All right. And the second part of it there is to create a positive mindset heading into the topic. So if we think about those two criteria there, go and meet someone and tell them something interesting about yourself and why you come along to this course. Well, for the person that's not so extroverted, or for the person that's not so comfortable about even being there and being around other people they don't know, it may or may not actually induce feelings of positivity. I need to go and meet someone and I'm not sure what to tell them about myself is what could come up for people. And the other question is, why am I here? Well, I'm here because my boss told me I have to be here, is often a response that you may receive if you do that icebreaker there, right? So if we are going to craft a great icebreaker, well, we need to create a great icebreaker that actually leads towards creating comfort and also creating a positive mindset heading into the topic, right? So we want our audience to feel good, feel excited, feel hungry to learn about the topic that we're going to go into. So the way to think about an icebreaker is basically two or three at the most, but ideally two, simple questions that you get your audience to ponder and share with each other that are going to make them feel comfortable and lead into the topic. So let's look at some examples for that. All right. So I'll repeat: two simple questions that you can get your audience to ponder as you head into your session. All right, so let's check them out. So number one, public speaking. If we were running a workshop on public speaking, we could say, go and meet someone and tell them who in your mind is the best public speaker you've ever seen and why were they great. All right. Hospitality. What is the best restaurant you've ever been to and why? All right. Now these can be done online and they can even be done in face-to-face environments as well. All right. So we got, go and meet someone, tell them what's the best restaurant you've ever been to and why. All right. Next one, safety inductions. All right. So what's the most adventurous thing you've ever done and what did you learn from it? Okay. What's the most adventurous thing you've ever done and what did you learn from it? Very, very generic question, and everybody's going to be comfortable to answer that. Next one, leadership. Leadership. Who was the best manager and leader you have ever had and why were they amazing? All right. Very generic questions here. And I believe, and we believe, that everybody would be comfortable to answer those questions. And it's going to instigate and create an environment where people are willing, hungry, open to learn. What you don't want to do is create an icebreaker that's based on a negative question, such as go and meet someone and tell them what's the most frustrating experience you've ever had, or what's the worst restaurant you've ever been to. All right, those are going to be bad questions because the purpose of an icebreaker is to create comfort and positivity towards the topic, right? So if you base it on a negative thing, then you need to then work very hard to clean up the mess or the negative vibe that's in the room there. All right. So two or three positive questions that make people feel comfortable with each other and about the topic. All right. So hopefully that's made sense there for you. All right. So now let's jump into the next topic, which is rapport between the trainer and the group and the trainer. Now, most times this is handled by a self-intro. And the reason it's handled by a self-intro is that, naturally as a trainer or a speaker, we want to reveal ourselves to the group. We want to create a connection. But fundamentally, at the core of it, there's two questions that are sitting in the audience's mind as they sit down to listen to you. All right. They are fundamentally thinking, whether it's conscious or not, they are thinking, why should I listen to you? Why are you the expert? Why should I take my time out to listen to you in particular? All right. Now, the second part of it is, why should I listen to you about this topic? All right. So why is this topic really, really important? And why are potentially you the best person to tell me about the topic? All right. And if we strategically look at a self-intro as an opportunity to answer those two questions, guess what, folks? You're going to hit a home run, you're going to nail it, and you're going to create that deep level of rapport. And as we say, if there is no rapport, then we cannot influence our audience. If we can't influence our audience, we can't change or help them change their behavior or their thoughts in any way, shape, or form, right? So this area of rapport, it's very, very, very important. And unfortunately, when people actually think about their self-intros, they often get them highly wrong. And also, they don't really pay enough attention to really creating that bond and that connection. All right. So a great self-intro will build connection with the audience and build credibility for you as the trainer. All right. So it's got to attack, or it's got to fulfill those two outcomes there. All right. So build connection and build credibility and with your expert status there. All right. Unfortunately, as we've said, many people don't actually put the time, the space, and the energy to crafting a great self-intro. So what we often find instead is that, number one, the trainer will tell the audience things that aren't relevant. I've got 2 cats, 3 dogs. I've traveled to Paris, and, I love long walks on the beach. All right. All those weird things. Number 2, they go off on tangents and tell the stories, that nobody really wants to know or cares about, or, here's a photo of my family, all those things that really, do we need to know it as part of the session? Probably not. All right. Number 3, they don't practice their self-intro, which is a really unusual thing to do or not do, because if you really take it seriously, it is an amazing opportunity to really set your session up for massive success. All right. So now, having said all of that, let's look at a quick formula that you can use to build an amazing trainer self-intro. So let's look at it. My name is, probably a good thing to include. My name is, I have been for X years. When I first started, I thought X. I soon realized it was more about X. I love teaching this course because I get to share with you and help you ultimately be able to. All right. So at this point, you may want to take a screenshot. You may want to take a photograph of that. You may want to write that down. In this formula, I'm going to give you a couple of examples that you'll be able to look at and craft and use this to craft your own amazing trainer self-intro. And you need to appreciate that this takes a couple of moments of thinking about and actually putting in the time and effort. And it may be something that you adjust over time as well. And you will naturally do a slightly different version of this if you present to different audiences and different topics. All right, because as we said, it's about building your connection and credibility with that particular audience that you're about to speak to. All right, so let's look at how we could deploy this for different scenarios. All right, so my name is, I have been for X years. All right, so you can see it there on the screen. Let's jump into it. Nursing. All right, so my name is, let's go with Mary Smith. My name is Mary Smith. I have been a nurse for 5 years. When I first started nursing, I thought nursing was all about just providing medication and making patients feel good in the hospital. I soon realized it was more about truly communicating effectively with the patient so that they could feel empowered, so they felt empowered with their own treatment and recovery and being a member of a team to make the hospital really run smoothly. I love teaching this course because I get to share with you not just how to treat patients well, but also how to really communicate effectively with patients and your team and help you ultimately be able to make a massive difference in the lives of your patients at the hospital here. All right. Now, hopefully, as you read through that example, you can start to see what we're doing here. We're starting to build a connection. One day, I was just like you right now. I thought nursing was just about doing X, Y, Z. And then over time, I realized it was actually about X. And that transition is what makes you the credible expert there. And when you follow this example, when you follow this formula here that we've got, it allows you to set up that connection and then that sudden juxtaposition of, wow, you are the expert in this area and I need to listen up to you, right? So that's a simple example. And basically we've pointed out what the audience are probably thinking. And then we've pointed out how the training that you're about to deliver is going to be of most benefit for this particular audience that you're about to speak to there. All right. Now, we haven't said, I love teaching this course because I get to share with you all about me. No, I love teaching the course because I get to share with you how you will be able to do X and Y. All right. So let's jump into another example. All right. Let's talk about forklift driver. All right. So my name is Bill Smith. I have been a forklift driver for 5 years. When I first started driving forklifts, I thought driving forklifts was all about just picking up a load and moving it from point A to point B. I soon realized it was actually about how smoothly I could safely and effectively move things in the factory in an efficient way that created momentum for the entire operations of the factory to take place. I love teaching the course because I get to share with you not just how to move stuff well, but also how you can think bigger and really have an impact on the overall operations of the factory as a whole. All right. Hopefully, you're starting to pick up a pattern here, and maybe you're seeing the power of these examples that we're going through. All right. So now let's look at another example. Project management. My name is Toby Jones. I have been a project manager for 5 years. When I first started project management, I thought it was all about just creating project plans and using the fancy software to make a project. All right. I soon realized that the success of a project was really about so much more. It was actually about how successfully you can get people on board with the project in the beginning and keep people engaged throughout the entire project lifestyle. I love teaching this course because I get to share with you not just how to create the plans and use great software, but also how you can get people on board with your plans and make a long-lasting change in the organizations that you work in. All right. You probably agree with me when we say that is probably a very powerful, inspiring self intro there. And strangely enough, it's all about the audience's benefits that they are going to receive there in the area of a project management course, which is awesome. All right. So hopefully you're starting to see the flavor of the intro here and the formula in action. All right. And the most important part is when I first started, I thought blah blah, but I soon realized it was more about X. All right. So those are the most important key components that really position you as the expert there, folks. All right. So up till now, we've talked about rapport. We've talked about rapport with the group members and getting our icebreakers right. We've now talked about getting our self intro right and getting our trainer and group connection at a deep level there. So now let's talk about the next component, which is engagement. All right, very, very important. And as we talked about, engagement is the response that you get from the audience as you are speaking to them. So we all know that when we attend an engaging training session, we have a very memorable and amazing experience that we all walk away from feeling very, very good. All right. But when we have the opposite, we know that also that can leave a bad taste with us, right? So we want to make our audience training sessions or our training sessions as engaging as possible. So even as we think about this now, let's review what creates engagement for you. Well, probably colorful images. They probably do. Unique and different experiences that are shared in the group, that are created in the training session. They generally will create engagement for all learners there. And drawing upon diversity of the group, creating engaging activities, that's going to definitely do it. Things that tap into your interests. So as a participant, if you find that you're covering content that really interests you, definitely you're going to be more engaged. Last of all, their regular unexpected change is something that also creates engagement. And we need to realize that first you need to capture people's attention, and then you need to get people guessing and wondering what's coming next. That leads us to the next question, which is ultimately, what is the formula for boredom? And if we want to bore someone, well, I don't think anybody really wants to bore someone. But if we want to engage them, we kind of need to think about, well, what is the opposite? What actually leads to someone being bored? Well, let's imagine you go to a party, all right, and you are talking to someone, and maybe they're talking to you about something that you are really, really, really not interested in, right? And they are talking to you about irrelevant information. And maybe they're talking to you in a way that's very, very, very predictable. You can even imagine what they're going to say next. Maybe, you just you've just zoned out, and it's just become so how do we put it, so scripted, and it's like so old fashioned and whatever it may be. Maybe they even deliver it in a very monotone fashion. And what we need to realize is if you want to bore someone, all you need to do is tell them some stuff or some content that they have no interest in, and it doesn't connect with them and has no relationship to them, and they never will have any interest in the topic. And you do it in a very predictable manner. All right. Now, if you do that, it's going to guarantee some boredom there. So if you walk into a training room and talk about a topic that has nothing to do with the topic that you need to present on or that people have an interest in, they're going to zone out. And if you do it in a very predictable fashion, maybe you show PowerPoint, 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 people no longer need to listen to that trainer. They can pretty much just look at the slide and then just read it for themselves. Look at the slide, read it for themselves. Look at the slide, read it for themselves. You're going to instantly bore that audience, and there's going to be zero engagement there. And we need to appreciate, if we want to create engagement, there's certain things that we need to be able to do, right? And that leads to the formula for engagement. And that is fundamentally, first half is essentially present content that is relevant to the audience and they have a connection to. So content that's going to be a benefit to them. And then the second component is do it in an unpredictable fashion or an unpredictable methodology. And when we actually do that, then we're able to create engagement anytime, anywhere, and do it in a way that really creates a memorable experience, right? So let's look at 4 basic tactics that you can use to build engagement. Okay, so number 1 is ask questions. Ask lots and lots and lots of questions, because as soon as the audience is asked a question, their mind peaks up. They're like, wow, I need to pay attention. Or, well, did the trainer just say something? Or, wow, I feel part of this conversation here. Or my existence matters, or my input matters, right? So instead of saying, hi, today, folks, we're going to cover the 10 principles of effective leadership and going 1, 2, 3. Instead of doing that, we first ask our audiences, okay, folks, let's discuss in pairs or as a group, what do you believe are the 10 qualities of an effective leader, right? So you want to ask your audiences before you tell something. So ask. Also, you want to check in with your audience quite regularly. For example, does that make sense? Or before I move on, what did I just cover there? Or the biggest thing that we can see from this slide is XYZ. How does this apply to you and your scenario? All right. So we want to ask lots and lots and lots and lots of questions. And a general great rule around this is you want to have a question every 4 to 6 minutes, right? That's what you want to be thinking about. Now, number 2 is very teaching modalities, right? Now, the success of your session and the success of your engagement comes back to really how much variety can you create. So are you doing pair work? Are you doing individual work? Are you doing group work? Are you getting people to stand up and move around in your session? Are you getting different people to work with different people? You see, it's the difference and the change that creates people's willingness to be attentive, to pay attention, and to be part of your session. If it is stagnant and if just you showing PowerPoint, click, 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 there is no variety. There is no change in the scenery, and you will not create any long-lasting engagement there. And that leads to point number 3 here, which is the 8-minute rule. All right. So generally what we found is that people's attention spans are between 8 to 13 minutes. So it would kind of be silly to carry on an activity for longer than 8 minutes because you're going to lose people very quickly. So our advice around this is make sure that any activities that you do are like timed for around 3 to 8 minutes max, right? You want to have lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of different activities that you're running, and you want to keep them short and sharp and transition very regularly there. Number 4 is build. Ooh, we've got a bit of a dot there. We've got build. I wonder what we could be building. I wonder. Because this is the most important thing, folks. If you can build this thing here, you are always going to be able to hook people listening to what you've got to say. They're going to be sitting on the edge of their seat, wondering what's going to come next. Because engagement If you want to create engagement, you need to get your audience to a place of wonder, anticipation, contemplation, and maybe even excitement. And how could we do that? Well, very simply, we want to build suspense. Yes, number 4 is build suspense. And one very, very, very simple way to do that is we want to leave blanks on our slides. And hopefully you can see on this slide alone, we've got a couple of places. We've got number 2 there and number 4. We want to build suspense. So how do we do it? We put blanks on the slides, or maybe we play half a video and then we get our audience to guess what's going to happen next. Or maybe we tell half a story and then we tell the other half later. Or maybe we tell our audiences later, we're going to cover something that's going to really help you out, get brand new results, right? Whatever it is, we want to build suspense, and we don't want to just tell them all the information at one time, right? So the worst thing you can ever do is put all of the information on your slides. Instead, you want to build the experience together with them. And one simple way to do that is to drop blanks on the slides here. And hopefully you've noticed that throughout all the lectures that you may have watched, we've really tried to deploy that strategy there because it gets you wondering, what could that actually refer to? And we can do that through lack of words or blanks. We can do it through great images and just speaking about the images. We can do that through many different tactics, but it's all about building curiosity, wonder, and anticipation. All right. So that is a little bit about how we can build engagement. And now let's check out advanced questioning. All right. So a couple of the one that we've already talked about there was, does that make sense? And you want to be checking in with your audience every 3 to 4 minutes there, right? So does that make sense? Next one is, if you can see my screen, type yes in the chat box. If you can see my screen, raise your hand, right? If you can see the slide, raise your hand. If you're in a face-to-face environment, if you can say, if you can see my screen, raise your hand, right? But you want to be getting that response. Number 3, grab a pen and write this down. Or you probably want to write this down. All right. So you want to grab people's attention and make sure that they're writing down the key things that you're telling them. At the end of the day, if they remember it or not, that's up to you, folks. That's your responsibility. I know that's a bitter pill to swallow, but whether they remember it or not, that's up to you and how creative you can be. So number 3, grab a pen and write this down. Grab a pen and write this down. You want to be saying that very regularly throughout your session. Another version of that is you probably want to write this one down. All right, you probably want to write this down. Next, number 4, if you put yes in the chat box, right? So this would be online delivery. So if you've been to Paris, type yes in the chat box, right? Or if you think that safety is important, put a yes in the chat box, all right? So, or if you get nervous before delivering a training session, put yes in the chat box, right? Or if you know what PPE stands for, type what PPE stands for in the chat box, right? Or if you would agree that needle stick injuries would be a problem, type yes in the chat box, right? So that's another simple way that you can get people to respond. All right. Number 5 is, if you, then raise your hand. All right. So if you've been to Paris, then raise your hand. If face-to-face learning environment, right? If you've ever done a risk assessment, then raise your hand. If you have ever been nervous before doing a presentation, then raise your hand, right? Very simple questions that we can pose to our audience and get them to respond to them. Now, again, all of these are like tools in your tool belt. All right. If you use the tools, you will get better results. If you choose not to use these phrases, you will get less than better results, right? So highly recommend that you start using them, play with them, and try them out. Make them your own. But at the end of the day, here is some fundamental, simple ways that you can make your delivery so much more engaging, right? So don't just look at this and go, oh, that's nice. Actually write these down. Get excited and start to play with them when you deliver your sessions, a part of your TAE, or even any presentations that you do back in your workplace as well. Now, next we've got number 6. Would you agree that? All right. So would you agree that some people get nervous before presentations? Would you agree that being efficient, and being able to do a service in a way that creates a positive outcome is important. Would you agree that there are some great restaurants in Australia? Would you agree that compliance is very, very important? Raise your hand if you think compliance is very important. All right. Would you agree that delivering a training session is something that you need to practice? All right. So, number 6 here is a powerful phrase that you can use in order to get everybody to agree with you in the room, and then bridges into presenting an idea. All right. Number 7, would it be a problem if? Would it be a problem if we didn't rehearse our presentations? Raise your hand if you would agree with that. Would it be a problem if we didn't do a pre-start check and the forklift didn't actually start? Right? Would that be a problem, folks? Raise your hand if you think that would be a problem. Awesome. Would it be a problem if we had an employee that was not performing well and we didn't know how to motivate that employee? Would that be a problem? Awesome. So I think you're catching that there. So would it be a problem if is a way that we can outlay a problem before we start to teach on a topic there. So would you agree that? Would it be a problem if, right? So does that make sense? And hopefully that makes sense there. All right, so next topic area is that of retention, because at the end of the day, it's not what we say that matters, it's what people remember. And if we don't direct our attention to really helping people build retention around our information, well, we may miss massive opportunities there. And as we've talked about, people need to hear things multiple times, and they need to try things and do things multiple times before they actually remember it. All right. So that leads on to, how do we actually make our training memorable? So we got 1, 2, 3, 4 here. Highly recommend that you write some of these down. As you can see, there's a few blanks here on the slides. Number 1 is repetition. Number 1 is repetition. What is it, folks? Repetition. Repetition. Oh, I feel like I'm repeating myself. Repetition, right? So you want to have multiple times where you are sharing the instructions in multiple ways and you're sharing the ideas multiple times, and people get to try something multiple times, right? Repetition. Number 2 is be aware of the saturation point of your learners. Now, we need to appreciate our learners cannot continue learning anything for long extended periods of time. Learners need time to empty their cup, so to speak. So you need to be comfortable to give people breaks or give people opportunities to actually share ideas with each other so that they are ready for the next piece of content, right? So we find that generally people will need a break every 40 minutes or every 60 minutes, if it's a 5-minute break or a 10-minute break, or even just turn to the person next to you and share with them what's one thing that you've learned so far. Is another simple way for people to get their minds clear and be ready for the next piece of content there, right? So allow people to empty their cups quite regularly throughout your training session. And the cup is a metaphor or analogy for the mind of the learner. All right. So number 3 is keep it simple. Keep it simple. Rule of 3 and metaphors galore. All right. So we need to appreciate people like to remember things in chunks. All right. So generally chunks of 3. Keep it simple. So if you can present concepts such as these are the 3 steps to do something, or this is the 3 principles to, or the 3 steps to, or the 3 ideas to, that is going to really stick in their minds. And teach the first 3, then teach the next pieces, then teach the next pieces, then teach the next pieces. Teach it in chunks, and it's going to be even more memorable for your audience. So it says metaphors galore there, which basically just is a reminder that anytime that you can draw upon a metaphor, it's going to be easier, because an image or an idea will represent a lot more in the mind of an audience. So we've been talking about the concept of a life jacket, right? So that is a great example of a metaphor or analogy. And that simply represents the idea that someone hasn't learned something until they've absolutely done it there, right? So metaphors galore, metaphors galore. use as many metaphors as you can to really tap into the emotional side of the brain of the learner there, right? So keep it simple, chunks as much as you can, and really tap into that rule of three there. Number 4 is regular review in creative ways, right? So always be thinking, how can I get my learners to review concepts or ideas even more regularly? So maybe that's just after every hour or piece of content, you simply say, all right, get into small groups and share with them what's one thing that we've covered so far today that's really stood out to you. Or get into pairs and simply read to your partner the notes that you've taken so far. All right, and then go back and forth. Could be anything at all, but make sure that there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of regular review. Start of day, end of day, middle of the day, throughout the entire day, you are reviewing content consistently. All right. And even in a 1-hour session, there is so much regular review. All right. So let's just recap. Number 1, repetition. Number 2, be aware of students' saturation points and give them lots and lots of regular breaks if you can. If you can't, then at least give them opportunities to empty their cup, so to speak. Number 3, keep it simple. Use the rule of 3, use chunking, and don't be afraid to simplify, simplify, simplify. And number 4 is regular review in creative ways. All right. So that leads on to our next topic of learning styles. As many of you would know, and you probably read about in textbooks, or maybe you've come across the idea of visual, auditory, and kinesthetic learners. All right. And many people will say, well, I'm a visual learner. So, that's a funny joke. Oh, I'm a visual learner. That created a funny image in my mind. Or I'm a kinesthetic person. I love to do hands-on activities. Or I'm an auditory person. I love to listen to music. I love to go dancing. All right. Now, whether you agree with learning styles and the validity of them or not, doesn't really matter. Because what we know fundamentally as a fact is that no two learners learn exactly the same way. No two learners learn exactly the same way. So what we can say is that ultimately within your training room, you are going to have all different types of learners. You are going to have people that learn visually. Other people are going to learn auditorily. Other people are going to be kinesthetic. And it's not necessarily making sure that you've got perfect PowerPoints or perfect discussions or perfect role plays, things like that. It is about how well you can effectively integrate all 3 styles into your training session. All right. So the real truth is everybody has their own style of learning, which it can often be a combination of all 3 as well. So really, the final thought around learning styles is be consistently thinking about how you can balance it up even more and bring even more of a variety of the styles into your training. So if you yourself are a very visual person, highly likely you're going to like doing a lot of PowerPoints, which is fine. But what about the auditory people who like discussions? What about the kinesthetic people that love the role plays? All right. And if you're a kinesthetic person, highly likely you're going to do a lot of role plays. But what about the PowerPoint people? What about the discussion people? Now, if you are a auditory person, you love discussions, but what about the role play people? What about the PowerPoints and the handout people, right? So at the end of the day, the core thing to remember is you must provide a balanced approach that everybody benefits from and everybody feels included by. All right. So you definitely want to have your handouts. You want to have your PowerPoints. You want to have discussion time. You want to weave that in. You want to have your role plays and your activities. And throughout these delivery cluster lectures, you would have heard us talk about the different activities that you can build in to your training sessions there. All right. So now let's jump to our next topic, which is personality styles, the 4 types of learners you will have in any training session. All right. Now, this is a bit of an interpretation of a model that's out there on Google with Honey and Mumford Kolb kind of research. And you can certainly dive a little bit deeper into it. But we're going to dissect and unpack this model and make it really applicable for you as a trainer managing groups in a training session. So it's the PART model, P-A-R-T. P-A-R-T. And each of these letters stands for a particular style or behavioral type or personality type. Now, we're about to make some generalizations here. Don't be offended. Don't be too upset. These are just some convenient categories that we can observe within a learning environment. All right. So the first one is P. P stands for pragmatist. P stands for pragmatist. All right. A stands for activist. R stands for reflector. T stands for theorist. All right. So we got pragmatist, activist, reflector, and theorist. All right. Now, knowing this information is going to make you extremely effective in the training room because you will see things happen and you'll be able to predict people's behavior, but also really work with it. And you won't take behavior of learners personally. You won't get upset by it. You'll just go, all right, great. This is what's happening right now for these people. I can see this particular type playing out. All right. So let's dive into it. So P, pragmatist. Now, pragmatist is somebody that likes to jump in, have a go. They're adventurous, and they don't worry about getting the details correct or 100% correct, first go. They're not too worried about that. They are a little bit impatient. They just want to get it done, have a go, and try it out. All right. A stands for activist, and activists like to test the boundary conditions and they like to test the credibility of the information and credibility of the trainer as well there. All right. So they may ask a little bit challenging questions. They may be a little bit opinionated and all of that, right? R stands for reflector. Now, reflector likes to take their time. They like to watch other people. They like to, slowly ease into things and they like to know that they're doing it the right way. All right. Now, T stands for theorist, as we said, and a theorist, they love to get it right. All right. They're very much about the accuracy, the details, the credibility of the information is very important, but the references, very, very important, right? So it's got to be right for the old theorist. All right. Now, all of these perfect people are perfect and beautiful. All of these people are needed, well, or will show up in a learning environment. And they all have different, unique, and special needs that we need to cater towards, be aware of, and not be offended by. So now let's jump this into a real world application and how each show up in a training environment. All right. So let's first of all talk about a real world environment. All right. So let's imagine that we are putting together a project to build a bridge. All right. Build a bridge. So real world environment, first of all. So we're going to talk about a scenario of building a bridge. Okay. So probably we want the pragmatists out there digging up the road and getting it ready for the bridge. All right. Now we probably want the activists out there arguing at the local government office for the importance of the bridge and getting the business case across the line for the bridge. All right. Now, the reflector. We probably want the reflector out there surveying other bridges around the world to find out the best possible bridge structure. All right. Now, T is the person that maybe designs the bridge and maybe the architect because they need to get it right. All right. So in the real world context, you are always going to come across the P, the A, and the R, and the T, and they're perfect and beautiful. Everybody's out there. And I'm sure you can think of many scenarios that would, fall, that you would find people in these categories, right? So an entrepreneur is definitely going to be more of a pragmatist, right? A solicitor, a lawyer is definitely going to be more of an activist, right? A researcher is probably going to be more of a reflector or maybe a theorist, right? So maybe a scientist would be a great theorist there, right? So we need to appreciate everyone's perfect and beautiful, and everyone will show up in your training a little bit differently, and even a combination of these four as well. So now let's actually think about how would they show up in a training environment. Well, a pragmatist, they may show up as very enthusiastic, quite eager, quite hungry to learn, and they might answer your questions like quite quickly as well, right? Then activists, they may challenge your information a little bit. They may ask some difficult questions to the trainer. A reflector may sit back a little bit and may be a little bit shy, a little bit hesitant, and may not really be very loud or vocal. They may be a little bit reserved. A theorist is somebody that really craves clarity and wants to know all the facts, the figures, the data, and they may even spot typos in your materials that you present to them, right? So knowing all of that, well, how do we actually apply that to a training room? And here's the deal, folks. If you get this wrong, then you're going to start to notice things. But that's great because you now have a framework to notice these things, right? So first of all, you're grouping people in groups, right? So let's just think about it for a moment. If you put all the pragmatists together, well, highly likely they may battle a little bit because one of them will want to take the lead. Well, both of them will want to take the lead, and there'll be a little bit of internal struggle there because they want to get it done. And, one person wants to lead, but the other person wants to lead as well there, right? Then if we put two activists together, they may debate or they may argue a little bit, and they may even argue about the relevance of the actual activity that they're about to undertake. If you put two reflectors together, then possibly it may be very quiet because neither reflector wants to go first, right? Because they need to feel comfortable before they start doing anything, all right? Key theorists, they may, if they're two theorists in a group, they may struggle a little bit and they may even sit there pondering, are we doing it the right way? They may overthink the activity and they may look at the instructions trying to work out, have they got it right? All right. So at the end of the day, if you want to group people together, if you can group people in different combinations, then you're going to have a much more successful activity. So maybe putting pragmatists with reflectors, activists, with theorists, just different combinations, you're going to get better results. All right. Now, that leads to the next point, which is when calling on people for volunteers, never, ever, 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 ever call on a reflector to go first. All right. Instead, you want to pick your pragmatists, the people that are hungry, the people that are enthusiastic, the people that, are jumping out of their seats to try something. Pick those people as your volunteers. And as a side note, don't ever ask for volunteers, right? Because your pragmatist is going to they're going to be jumping out of their seats and wanting to have a go anyway, right? You'll see it in their energy. Next, when calling on people to share. So the idea is when you're going around the group and getting people to share their experience or share their ideas or share their insights or discoveries, ideally pick your pragmatists first and pick your reflectors last. All right. So that's just a simple way to think about them. And just as a side note, typically when you are doing anything in a training room, the pragmatists will finish first and the reflectors will finish last, right? And then the activists and theorists in between, right? Now, the pragmatists will get a little bit frustrated with the reflectors for not hurrying up, and the reflectors will get a little bit frustrated with the pragmatists for going so quickly, right? So just be aware that that dynamic is going to be in your room as well. Now, the last part there is not getting upset because of your learner's behavior. Very, very important that you never, ever, ever take it personally because people are just acting out from their style, their personality there, right? So don't get upset if the pragmatist is overly enthusiastic. Don't get upset with the reflector who's holding back a little bit. Don't get upset with the theorist that finds a typo in your document. That's them being them at their very best. That's totally fine. That's how their brain is wired, right? Or somebody that says, show me your references for that quote XYZ, right? That's going to be a theorist kind of comment. That's totally fine. That's who they are. And that's awesome as they are there, right? So everyone's perfect and beautiful. So hopefully this has been valuable for you. So we've got pragmatists, activists, reflectors, and theorists. And now that you're aware of it, you will guaranteed see it a lot more around you. And maybe as I've described those, you may be able to connect with some of those definitions as well there. So now let's have a chat about using videos, right? So we want to chat about types of videos that you can use in a training session, how to set up videos well, And last of all, how to debrief a video. Unfortunately, many people get this thing wrong. And as a result, their videos are not really creating valuable learning experiences for their audiences. And the worst thing that you can do is show a video and people have a negative reaction around it. It's the last thing that you want. All right. So videos, there are many different types of videos that you can use. You can use fault finding videos, all right, where essentially you show a video of the mistakes and you show a video of what not to do. Okay, and you say to the audience, all right, let's check out a video and let's see how we should not do a task, and let's look at 3 things that this person or people are not doing effectively. All right. How-to videos would be the opposite. Let's check out this video and let's see what are 3 things that this person is doing really, really, really well. Next, we've got case study videos where you show an example of something that happened, and maybe it's something that's quite well known or not known at all. And, you have a chat about it, and that builds your content. Your comedy or state break videos, right? So this can be an example of a way to break the tension in a room, or bring a funny light to a topic that you're talking about. However, you do want to be very careful when you're picking those videos, right? So success of the video is all in the setup and debrief of the video, right? So the setup is all about what are you saying before you show the video. All right. So we want to be very specific. We want to tell audiences what to look for and what to focus on. So we are now about to watch a video on X. When you watch it, I want you to specifically focus on how well he, she does X. After the video, I will be getting you to share with your partner 2 things that he, she does really well. All right. So this is going to tune the audience's mind into that specific thing. All right. Then you play the video. Then debrief. Please turn to the person next to you and share 2 things that you notice that they did well or not so well. All right. So it's really drawing their attention towards exactly what you want them to focus on. All right. If you don't, then they just see the video and wonderful, but they sometimes are looking at a video going, why are we watching this? Direct their attention. It's so, so important. Also, length of the video, as we've talked about, you don't want to make the video too long. Don't make it longer than 2.5 minutes, 4 minutes. Anything longer than 4 minutes, you are going to lose your audience very quickly. So the counter to that is play a bit of the video, set up the activity, play a bit of the video, debrief, then play the next video, then the next and the next, right? But be very careful how long your video is. All right. So then other potential tasks from videos that you can do. All right. So you can ask questions such as, what did you notice that the person did in the video that was unique or unusual? What was your biggest discovery or learning after watching the video? What do you think was the core message that the video was trying to get across? And share with your partner or write it down. What are 3 things that the person in the video did poorly? What could have been done even better? So there's some questions. Some other things we could do: stepping out the content, play half the video and then say to the group, brainstorm. What do you think happened next? Then play the video and the group gets to see if they were right. Case study videos. Before playing the video of a known situation in the news or a scenario, ask the group, what do you know about the scenario? And play the video. What 3 things did you discover? Share with your partner. What if approaches? If you were one of the characters in the story, what would you have done differently? All right. So fundamentals, when we're thinking about videos, we need to think about the following. All videos must have a purpose behind them. Please don't willy-nilly just show videos for the sake of it. Make sure that it has a purpose behind it, and make sure you do the setup and the debrief. Choose videos with good sound and clear images. Very, very important, particularly in online delivery, all right, because you're dealing also with internet speed as well. Number 3 is ideally pick videos from your own country. All right. It's okay occasionally to have videos from other countries, but you are going to come across different accents and different things to think about. And maybe different countries use different regulations and different policies, procedures, different methods of doing things. So ideally pick videos from your own country. Number 4, tell people in the setup what to focus on If you don't, they may have a negative reaction and focus on exactly the wrong thing. All right. So very, very important. And hopefully you have written those down there. So now let's wrap up our session with a bit of a quiz. All right. So number one, what are the 3 learning styles? Hopefully you wrote those down. Number two, what is the most important thing to do in relation to learning styles when you design and deliver your sessions? Number three, what does RER stand for? Hopefully you remember that. Number four is, what's the purpose behind an icebreaker? Number five, what is the real purpose behind a trainer self-intro? Number six, what is one way you can make your training more memorable? And number seven, what are the 4 stages of learning something? All right. So you may want to take a moment now and take a photo of these questions, pause and think about what the answers could be. Take a photo, take a screenshot, and do a bit of research. Maybe you rewatch certain sections, or maybe you've written down some great notes and you're already good to go. But let's just take a pause moment. I'm just going to pause it here, and then we'll discuss the answers there. Awesome, folks. Let's check out the answers. So, what are 3 learning styles? Visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. All right. And there is one more, read, write, but that's okay. For now, we just got the 3 there. What is the most important thing to do in relation to learning styles? Well, keep your delivery balanced and cater for everyone. Number 3, what does RER stand for? We've got rapport, engagement, retention. Number 4, what is the purpose behind an icebreaker? Well, it's all about building comfort and creating a positive mindset about the topic. All right. Remember, 2 questions that would build rapport. All right. And people would feel comfortable to share about. Next is, what is the real purpose behind a trainer self-intro? Absolutely. It's to build credibility and connection. Number 6, what is one way you can make your training even more memorable? Well, you can use metaphors, regular review, be repetitive, and be aware of the saturation point of your learners. And lastly, number 7, what are the 4 stages of learning something? Learning anything, really. Exposure, practice, personalization, and application there. All right. So overall, folks, hopefully you got some value. Thank you so much for watching this lecture series on delivery. And we really want to encourage you to watch these lectures multiple times to really solidify the concepts, the ideas. Now, guaranteed, some of the ideas may have challenged your thinking a little bit, and delivery, it does require you to shift your thinking, to shift your approach, and be willing to take on a new style and a new way to present information. All right. And the more that you just have an open mind, I'm just going to try some new ideas. I'm just going to, really adopt and be coachable and try some of these concepts and ideas that you've learned in the delivered cluster lecture series here. Try the storyboarding, try the TOA method, try the structure that we've gone through in the structure or agenda for the training session. Try it, see what happens, and really play with the ideas there. Because in life, you only get what you've got up until this point because of whatever you've done. If you want to create new results in the area of training and presenting, you have to be willing to try on some new ideas. So we highly recommend be coachable, try some things, see what happens. Play with the idea of noticing the pragmatist, the activist, or reflective theorist in your training room. Play with the idea of moving people around in the room. Play with putting suspense on your slides. Play with these concepts because these are tried, tested, and true ideas that will get you even better results as you go forward as a trainer and even as an assessor in the vet sector. So thanks so much for watching this lecture series. Hopefully you got some value, and the value will definitely come out the more that you apply each and every one of these concepts. Thank you so much, and we will see you in the next lecture series.